Good morning. Thanks for being here. I know it's pretty early, especially for the third day of GDC. Shall we start? I have a lot to say, so I'd rather start quite right away. To tell you more about the last decade, actually. It's insane. We're just discussing in the back about how time flies. And a lot of things happened since 2007 with the release of Assassin's Creed 1. Just to start, because I'm not a very public person and not a very vocal person, just start by introducing myself a bit. I define myself as a designer that works in creative industries. And I had a first career making toys. So if you like to discuss about development of construction toys, I'd be more happy to discuss that. But I guess you're more here today to learn about my experience at Ubisoft, and mostly on the Assassin's Creed brand, that I joined back in 2006 for the last year of production of AC1, then moving as a game designer on AC2. Then for 2 years, I worked more at the brand level, overseeing a bit the entire universe. And I came back to as a production level as a creative director, where I had the honor and privilege to direct Black Flag and Origin. So, yeah, and this was my personal achievement, where my two careers kind of collided. That was very nice. 2014 New York Comic Con. Okay, but so let's start right away to talk about the 10 years of Assassin's Creed. And what I propose you today, just to start with a quick video, just to immerse ourselves a bit into the franchise. So yes, 10 years between basically this AC1 hoodie and this Origins t-shirt. And so the question is, how did we move from one game, actually a sole game in 2007, to this massive global franchise of entertainment? I will structure this talk into three big phases. One about the creation of the franchise and finding really the recipe and our own identity, expanding it, and finally refreshing it with a deeper focus on Origins. And so if you're ready to enter the vault of Assassin's Creed, to enter the Animus, to deep dive into it, be ready, because there will be a lot of things. And so maybe I will talk fast. I hope you will follow me on that. So let's start with the creation of AC1, of Assassin's Creed. And I will talk about both Assassin's Creed 1 and Assassin's Creed 2. Actually, the story starts back in 2004, because as you may know already, the team behind Prince of Persia: Sands of Time got the mandate to prepare for the next gen. And if you remember, for the oldest of you, next gen back in the time was Xbox 360 and PS3. And to also reinvent the action-adventure genre. And so this is really this pop next gen that slowly but surely morphed into what became Assassin's Creed. And with Assassin's Creed, when the decision was made to create this new IP, the idea was really to bring a more mature take, to come up with something that was really conveying the next gen. And here, I stop just for a moment. This is the tutorial slide. Okay? So when you will see slides like that, these are actual PowerPoint slides from the date that you see here. So this is a slide from a PowerPoint back of 2006, and you will see quite a lot of them. And so the idea was really to bring modernity, next gen, have something really unique and really refreshing. And yes, the game was set during the Middle Age, but not this kind of Middle Age. We didn't want the franchise supposed to be a next gen, hit, to have this kind of treatment, very medieval. And so this is why some decisions were made. One important one was actually to have a more realistic treatment and to accept the M rating. That was not the case for POP. And this was a big step forward also. And with this realistic treatment came the present day. The reason behind the present day in the first place is really to create relatedness between the audience and the setting. Once again, yes, the game was set during the Third Crusade in the Middle Ages, but we wanted the overall game and the overall experience to feel really modern. And so with the DNA, with the animus, this was really edgy and allowing the game to be at the forefront of this new generation of games. It also came with some very strong iconic elements. The crest that evolved through times, but still remain one of the key pieces of the franchise. A clear reference coming from the eagle, the bird of prey, not only about the silhouette of the hood with the big hood, but also even the posing of Altair. And this notion of the assassin is really dominating the situation. He's overlooking, the world from above, ready to strike whenever he wants. The game was also coming with the hidden blade, very unique weapon. No other games had the same type of things, very well suited for the fantasy of an assassin. And I mentioned it already, the Animus technology that would allow us to link it to our 21st century audience. And so this was more about the treatment and the idea behind the rationale of certain elements. But in terms of gameplay, it was really also entering the open world genre, moving from a very linear, hardly level design, platformer to an open world game where actually these acrobatics with the parkour could be done and enjoyed everywhere in the city. And this was a big step for the team. This was huge, and this required actually new tech. And this is why we developed the Anvil engine in order to be able to render these fully interactive cities that you could interact with in many different ways. All buildings were climbable, as you know. It was also pushing the photorealistic treatment about characters, mostly in cinematic, and also the possibility to manage big crowds. If you remember, 10 years ago, having more than 100 NPCs walking in the streets, that was big. And this was also linked to the core gameplays. But the thing is, and this is probably the first lesson, when you develop the engine at the same time that you develop the content, well, there is a risk. Builds are not stable enough, so you cannot develop properly, gameplays and the full experience. So when the game hit the shelves, we had very good things. We were the fastest selling new IP. So with excellent sales, the narrative really caught people, the assassin fantasy, the world, the parkour, all this was good. But at the same time, we had mixed reviews because we were lacking of things to do. And there was too much repetitivity. Even some of the journalists even said, is it just a tech demo? And this is why I've put Assassin's Creed 2 within the creation section, because we really needed this game to deliver the full promise of what Assassin's Creed was. So 10 years ago, actually, when I joined AC2 as a game designer, the mandate was really clear. It was to repeat the commercial success of AC1, but this time fixing all the issues it had. Right? So that sounds easy, but it was quite a big challenge. And so what we started to do, and remember these slides are from 2008, we analyzed thoroughly AC1, doing a postmortem, looking at what people were asked to do in the game in terms of mission, etc. And what we realized was that actual missions of Assassin's Creed 1 were not asking players to do what they were enjoying on their own. Right? So we were asking you to sit on a bench, to pickpocket guys, when you were playing alone, you just like to parkour, to fight, or to blend. And so this was the first learning that helped shape Assassin's Creed 2. We identified our three main gameplay pillars. So the fight, the navigation, and the social stealth. And the entire game was designed around these pillars. So if you take the enemies, the archetypes of soldiers, they were challenging these three pillars. The three factions that you have to work with, that Ezio has to work with, the same, but supporting you on that. Even the type of side missions were based on that, so that we could actually enjoy them and support them fully. And so in the end, all the design loops were focused on actually supporting and making players use these pillars that were the more important. So that was the gameplay recipe that we came up with for AC2. At the same time, it was also clear for us that the franchise was about history, was about making history everyone's playground. And from day one, we started to work with historians to make people immersed into living a time period. And so when talking about history, it's not about that, you know, a very old engraving of a very old man. The Leonardo da Vinci that you meet in the game, as you probably know, is this young, you know, petulant and very dynamic man. And with things like that, we were giving players the joy, basically the excitement to live history, to be part of it. And so while history was really the core of the experience, Assassin's Creed 2 helped us also solidify the rest of the narrative. And this wonderful onion is here to show you that we kind of theorized the structure of our universe with what we called the onion structure, where it's clear that there is the video game layer, there is the present day layer, and in the present day you enter the Animus, and in the Animus you access the genetic memories in the past. And this is very important because this is solidifying everything within the Assassin's Creed universe. And so once that was solidified, we could expand on Desmond's story on one side, but also diving, you know, deeper on the mysteries with Subject 16 and the puzzles that was actually linking it to the first civilization. So around the historical period, we were developing the present day and the first Civ lore. And this was pushing all together for a very strong narrative. This was mostly for the content, but we had only 2 years to deliver AC2. And so we also needed to nail the production pipeline. And with Assassin's Creed 2, we came up with some very strong documentation, design documentation, from the creative briefs to the FSO. Actually, Patrick Plourde made a talk here at GDC a few years ago about that. And also during the end of production, the extensive use of playtests to secure quality of the game. And so this helped us also really solidify the way we were producing, we were developing Assassin's Creed. But back in 2008, also if you remember, there was a big game being released, spring 2008, GTA 4 hit the shelves. And so our top management actually required us to beef up the game, to increase the scope, but giving us the means to do so. And this was the first time we had multiple teams collaborating. So we worked with ANSSI in France that was developing all the villa development, you know, the villa management side. The newborn Singapore studio that helped us bringing all the secret locations, focusing on parkour. And we even created a second team in Montreal in charge of bringing some more exotic moments to spice up the overall experience. So think about the flying machine sequence or the carriage chase in the mountain. And so end of 2009, yes, champagne, we could celebrate. We managed to deliver this big game, a quality game with a strong narrative, with a lot of things to do, with very well integrated systems, wonderful world to explore. And so we really had this certitude, this certainty at this moment that we knew what Assassin's Creed was. And so it was now time to move on and start the expansion of it, right? So let's see what the expanding phase is about. The first thing that allowed us to expand the franchise was the creation of a brand team. So around Sébastien Puel, who was the executive producer, we were a little group of people around And so I was lucky enough to be part of this content team, working on all aspects, basically, to secure our mandates was to secure yearly releases and also develop the franchise awareness to really make Assassin's Creed something important. So if we talk about the yearly releases, it only could be done working with multiple core teams. I'm not talking about multiple teams collaborating on one game. This was a brand new thing. It was big. It was actually having multiple core teams working in parallel. So if you look at the first core team, the original one, that made AC1, that was behind AC2 also. In 2010, with the creation of this team, and so yes, Singapore already helping us during AC2. 2010, while the first core team was actually producing and developing Brotherhood, a second core team in Montreal started to work on Assassin's Creed 3 in parallel. The year after, while the first core team was moving on Unity, a third core team in Montreal was created to deliver Revelations, while the team of AC3 was continuing the thing, and so on. And so by adding people from different studios, developing talents all around the world, we were able to actually bring the franchise with this cycle. And Origins really benefited from that with strong addition from people from Sofia and Singapore, and a lot of them, a lot more, but you will see that these two studios mostly. And so it was really, during all this phase, it was moving from a collaboration organization to a co-development organization. What I mean is that collaboration basically is that. So you have the lead studio that is leading the overall experience, right? So let's take Black Flag, led in Montreal. And we give some mandates, to other studios. For example, the underwater sequences. But the way the game and the scope and the mandates were done is that it was always feasible to rescope, for example, if things turned bad or didn't work as well as intended. So it wasn't the case with the underwater. That's just for the sake of the example, don't get me wrong. But this was the idea. And slowly but surely, developing the expertise in other studios, we came, for example, this is Origins co-development structure, where you can see that without Sofia and Singapore, the world of Assassin's Creed Origins wouldn't be the same. They took big, massive chunks of the game, including the world, the quest, and major systems. And so this was done through this decade, basically. At the same time, while still working in parallel and having to respect some elements to make sure that we were still developing the franchise, each game had the mandate to stay fresh, to bring something new to the franchise and to the gamers. So if you look back at Brotherhood, he came up with actually the Brotherhood, the Assassin Brotherhood that you could manage, and also the multiplayer developed by Annecy in France. With Revelations, the navigation was fastened with the use of the hook blade. So it was a interesting twist. And in the present day, we had this weird Animus Limbo experience that was something new. With AC3, Assassin's Creed 3 2012, that was the first time we had the chance to play in a nature environment. And this was big. How do you deal with trees, with cliffs, etc.? And Singapore ramping up very strongly, bringing the naval missions that allowed us on Black Flag to bring this seamless naval world. And at the same time in Black Flag, we were changing the formula for the present day, and I will get into more details about that soon. Unity, a lot of work done to revamp the engine, actually, and also bringing the co-op. And Syndicate, with this nice twist of having two main characters in the storyline, and also working and tweaking the gameplay features. So that was the way basically all teams work in parallel while still having things and trying things. Some of them lasted, for example, the naval. Some of them didn't. Think about the tower defense Templar stuff in Revelations. But the idea was to try, to always try. Even if we knew the global structure, every single game brought something to the players and to the franchise. So the second pillars we had as a brand team was really to develop the franchise awareness and make AC very important into the video game industry, but even more actually in the entertainment industry in general. Because Assassin's Creed 2 started it. At the launch of AC2, you had Lineage, that was the first attempt of a live-action movie. We had 2 other games. We had a novel and a French comic book. The results were mixed. We had good things, mostly because they were focusing on prequels and sequels. Renaissance was so-so. It was a good novel, but the thing, it wasn't bringing anything new. It was literally the novelization of the script of the game. So if you liked the game, you would have read the exact same thing. And the French comic was exactly the thing that you want to avoid. Using the same characters, but in different stories, and breaking the cohesiveness of the universe. This is why, back in 2010, for us, it was clear that we needed to establish our vision when it comes to transmedia. And the fact, for example, that we wanted to enlarge our universe and making every single creation a good standalone that would add to the overall thing. You know, each product is a standalone, but the collection of them makes the IP bigger than the sum of its parts. And so this was really the vision back in 2010. And we knew that to do that and to expand it, we needed to work with other people. We couldn't do everything on our own. So we needed to be ready to share our vision of the franchise, to share what needed to be respected, so that other people, talented people in their own field of expertise, would actually bring very good content. And so this is why we had to clarify the fundamentals. So we developed Bibles with the cannots, can do, cannot do, with the 10 commandments of the franchise. Once again, solidifying the theory of the universe, explaining the onion structure, explaining the way genetic memories were transmitted. There are things that can be done within the animus. There are things that cannot be done, etc. And this was really important to have other people really understand what AC is, so that they would not dilute our universe. At the same time, we were developing tools to keep track of the narrative and to keep track of all the connections and the references from one creation. And I say creation because now it's more than games, right? You have novels, you have short movies, you have comic books, even at the character levels. Who knew who, what is this piece of information launching this new novel? And we had good results. If you look at Revelations, for example, in the game, Ezio finds a book that you can buy. This is Renaissance, expanding the story of Altair, so bringing new stuff. It was not just the same thing than the script of the game. We also had Project Legacy, that was a Facebook game, really interesting laboratory to test things, especially when it comes to breaking the fourth wall and include our audience within our universe. Embers was a short movie telling the story of the death of Ezio that we couldn't do if we respect the rules of the animus. So we couldn't do it in a game using the animus, but with a short movie it was good. And for example, with the comic book made by awarded authors Carl Kirchhoff and Cameron Stewart, where it's funny for the anecdote because 6 months prior to the release of the comic book, IGN released an article saying that basically all video games comic book adaptation would suck. And then 6 months after, they said, you know what, we said that, but actually this one is pretty neat, with Olaf. And up to the movie, actually, back in 2016, which really helped raise the awareness of the franchise, right? Look at the bump in Asia, mostly, plus 14 points. So this transmedia strategy is still running today. This is still the way we see things, and we think that's the way to go for big universes, big franchises. But this also led us to go maybe a bit too far, as you know. So breaking the fourth wall. The idea here, and I mentioned Project Legacy, was to say that, okay, Desmond Miles' story was really important because it was the glue, it was the cement between all the episodes all of the first game. It was connecting time periods that had nothing to do one with another. So it was the giving players and the audience this consistent story going on. But at some point, it was really becoming constraining and limiting. And so we needed to put it back to where it belonged, which means in the AC universe. And Assassin's Creed telling stories during the humankind history has many, many different stories. I mean, we have potential thousands of stories. And Desmond Miles is important, but it's one of them. And we wanted that to be able to put the players, to put the audience, not only players, but readers, watchers, at the center of our universe. Our vision behind that was really, so this is the evolution of the franchise from AC1 to Unity, as originally planned back in 2011. And one thing that was key here was AC3 in 2012. Why? Because at that moment, when Desmond saved the world, basically what we're saying is that the real world and our fictitious world were colliding. And the idea behind that was that since then, the present day of Assassin's Creed is our real world. And this is really cool in terms of narrative potential and crossover and things that we can do. So we wanted that to really, like I said, put the player and the audience inside our universe. No matter you like games better than comics, novels, or movies, you are inside of it, and we wanted players to be actually part of this universe so that they could engage themselves into this globally connected universe. So having connections, live connections, when talking about products, having this real transmedia storytelling, never contradicting one with another, and having the audience at the core of it. This is why, for example, we created Abstergo Entertainment. Because here, we were kind of turning around the rules of the Animus. We were bringing new ways to access memories to allow everybody, and not only Desmond, to access memories. This was important. And the cornerstone was Initiates, our plan with Initiates. Initiates was a website that was meant to become really the franchise hub. Some of you may know about it already, but in case you never heard about it, here is a video. This video is actually an internal one, so it's not a public one, showing the vision that we were having back then.
A secret war rages on. The Assassins and Templars fight to shape humanity's future. Dive into their conflict. Initiates. Explore the Assassin's Creed universe across land and centuries. Discover conspiracies and untold tales of the Brotherhood. Earn rewards for your progress within Assassin's Creed. And take your experience further in exclusive new missions set within the games. Customize a unique identity and take your place within the Assassin's Creed universe. Connect with the community, unlock exclusive content, and extend your gaming experience. Initiates. Join us.
So don't go into that website. It's obsolete. But as you can see, I mean, it was pretty ambitious, and it was working. And our core fan base was getting it. They were really into it. And this is why Black Flag, in many ways, was a transition game into this big master plan. This is why the present day of Black Flag was this first-person version. It was meant to be you, the present day character. And with an experience that was already bigger than just the game, with the companion application, and with the up-and-running website, Initiate. It was working. We had super good content, exclusive content on Initiate. We even added some missions in Black Flag through the website. So we were pretty confident that this was the way to go. Thing is, and I will come back later on that topic, like I said, the hardcore fans were really into it and enjoyed it, but we didn't maybe listen enough to the mass, to the majority of our audience. And so Unity, that was the following game, and remember, started back in 2011 after Brotherhood, was really meant to be the new next-gen game. And if you remember Assassin's Creed 1, it had some similarities, actually, because there was a lot of work being done at a very low level in terms of tech. You know, the engine was massively revamped with some fantastic rendering things. I mean, still today, Unity, I deeply believe it, is still one of the best looking games ever. But at the same time, we moved to a one-to-one scale building that had impact also on the navigation. And so the gameplay was impacted, not talking about the co-op development. And so we fell again a bit in this trap of working a lot on the tech and not allowing enough the teams that create the content to actually come up with something new. And so in the end, that's the way I see it, actually. I think we created kind of the perfect condition for a perfect storm. We had a game that was wonderful in terms of art, but that was not renewing enough the experience, right? And this map full of icons is maybe the best representation. At the same time, our vision about Initiate and an experience that was bigger than the game hurt us also a lot, because we came up with some design loops that people weren't ready and we didn't explain properly. And so having content locked in the game, you know, and that you needed asking you to do things on the website, and people got like, what's that for exactly? Are you kidding me? And so on top of that Sunday, when you get this kind of cherry, it hurts. And by the way, I need to precise that it was only one graphic card on PC only. But so, whatever. I mean, the game suffered from all this, even if, I mean, played today, with all the fixes, it's still a very beautiful and very good game. But in short, we probably flew too close to the sun, too far. We were a bit overconfident. And this is why Syndicate had to really focus on quality, which the team did very, very well. I mean, Syndicate is a very fun game, well polished, with a very interesting narrative twist with these the Fry twins. And so this was basically the only thing we could do with Syndicate to actually solidify the experience that we knew how to do. But we also knew it was time, this time, for a strong and for a big, big refresh. And when I talk about refresh, I never talk about reboot, actually. We had tons of discussions internally, and I always fought to say refresh more than reboot. Because at the same time, I felt it was super important to respect our franchise. We know Assassin's Creed, we own it, we are the only ones that can adapt it without betraying it. So the two aspects are key in my mind. And let's start with the refresh of the experience. This was the key thing. At first, it was clear. We needed clear priorities. So in 2014, this is a team meeting slide. The 4 big directions, basically, I gave to the team was, okay, we need to show that we master open world creation. We need to find a better, if not perfect, balance between the story and player's agency, be less hand-holding. We need to be a not skippable episode in the AC universe, and to remain a connected game. Even if without co-op, we need to show that being part of the community brings value to your overall experience. We're not a competitive franchise, but the community is very, very strong, and we need to leverage that. And so the idea behind modernizing AC was really to have the focus in terms of fluidity and players' freedom. That was key message given to the team. It's not about us, it's about the players, and they want to be free, they want to do what they want. And if needed, we need to adapt ourselves, our tools, our cultures. And so making a modern Assassin's Creed was really about being more systemic, more players-friendly, more connected, and also like I said, having a modernized pipeline. This is why we came up with this archipelago structure of the world. So if you remember, this is basically the core team of Origins is the one that delivered Black Flag. And so we came up with this structure of the world where procedural tools would allow us to create a lot of terrain, of ground, but where artists and level design were still owner of location, precise locations, to really have high quality and crafted locations. At the same time, even with the Eagle, so you see this is a prototype from the end of 2014. With the Eagle, the intention was to redefine the way we understand the world, the way we interact with it, and the way we see it living. Remember, living and breathing world, we said that for 10 years now, but this had to be true more than ever. So it's good to have a big world, but we needed to feel it in a meaningful way. And so this is why we came up with this meta AI, the global AI. Think about an RTS AI set on top of an open world game, where people would have their agenda and bringing credibility to the world while letting systems work all together and interact together to create emerging situations that we would not have predicted. And this was a very important step forward because the teams needed to understand that we needed to work more on situations and create good conditions of things to happen rather than scenarios that need to unfold in that specific sequence. And obviously, one of the big topics was also the fight, where we moved from animation paired animation system, to a hitbox system. And this was meant to really bring a fight that was more challenging, that was deeper, with meaningful weapons, being more reactive also, and way more modern. And this was coming also with, as you can see, transition animation shorter. Animations won't always match perfectly. That's okay from a player's perspective, but some of the team was struggling with that. And so in the end, we had to keep repeating that it was a cultural shift for the developers as much as a technological one. This was really important, and we kept repeating that to the team. We should focus on the experience and not the scripting or hard coding. Players don't care about our code, they just care about their experience. And so we needed to understand that losing a bit of control would bring more fun to the players rather than creating issues. And I had people coming to me saying, do you really want to deliver a crappy game? I said, no, it won't be the same. It will be fun, believe me. And so, yeah, I call that Operation Losing the Tie. Same badass and quality, but can we just breathe a bit more? More open, more fluid, and more modern? So that was the goal. But that was not an easy road. And so if you want to come by Montreal, work with us, be prepared. This is the kind of streets we have. But the balance was hard to find. So again, 2016, we had to, it was a constant, repeat process to explain that, for example, the setting, the envelope of the experience, so the time period, the world, the stories, we knew how to do that. We did it already many times. But all the structure of the experience, a lot of that was new. We're literally moving from, a gas engine to electrical car. And this is not easy. This is, we were out of our comfort zone. So at some point, we had teams not liking each other. The guys in charge of all the systemic aspects were coming to us and say, okay, these people, they want to tell stories and they want to control the systems. How are you supposed to do systemic things if you want to control them? And on the other side, the narrative team was coming and say, how are we supposed to tell stories if they want, they don't want less to take control of the systems? So we had these tensions, but in the end, it turned well. I think we all respect each other. We're all seasoned developers, and we found this balance. Remember the objective, second objective, balance between narrative and player's agency, where with this quest structure, we would have narratives, meaningful narratives, but using the systems, not directing every single bit of each missions. And so these were really the big things that we need to change. But at the same time, every day, every week, every month, we had to ask ourselves, what should we keep? What should we change? For example, think about the climbing. We knew that set in ancient Egypt, climbing were less prominent. I mean, we have less buildings, that's for sure. So how do we keep this verticality that is really needed for AC? Well, we want the navigation, we want the climbing to be available on all cliffs so that we could have set up in camps, in caves, using the mountains as a level design element. I like this example first because it's a very old video, as you can see the world here, but it's about the reach high points, the waypoints. What do we do with that? This is key. I mean, it's iconic of Assassin's Creed. You need to climb something, you dominate the world, have these wonderful vistas, and then it ends up with the leap of faith, which is, these three elements are almost defining what Assassin's Creed is. So do we keep it or not? If we keep it, it makes sense. But at the same time, we need to remove the link between that and the discovery of the world, because this was feeling very old, very the same way. So this is why we kept the feature, but we changed its utility. You don't unfog the map anymore with that. We asked ourselves a lot about social stealth. Does it make sense for Bayek to blend in groups? Well, in the narrative side, he's not per se an assassin, he's more a proto-assassin, more of a warrior. Doesn't make any real sense to have him with big axes, hiding among civilians. So we decided to focus instead on environmental stealth. This is why the hidden blade, for example, that was the nuclear weapon of assassins, and that was preventing us from having a good progression, because you don't care about being level 40 if with one hit with the blade you can kill anybody. So we needed to accept that the blade would need to be upgraded. And even the chests. We have quite a lot of chests still. But do we want the map to be filled with this type of icons when we can actually just change the icon and having a more an icon better suited for the setting and removing this reference to the old chest formula. And so this was, the way we worked to refresh the experience. At the same time, like I was saying, we needed to refresh, to respect our identity. And what I mean is that we tried to create as many references and connection between Origins and past games. For example, the eagle, obviously, was important. It's key to the franchise. Think about Assassin's Creed 1 part. Having the cut finger also to follow the blade was important. And even in the posing of Altair and marketing assets, even if we never juxtaposed the two, there was this reminiscence of AC1. The use of artifacts also was the same. We were the first game set prior to AC1, but we didn't want to fall into this totally crazy fantasy of Egypt. So we kept that low profile, basically. But the way we treated the first Civ drawings was the exact same, right? This is actually the exact, that's the same artist that did both. Sorry for the spoiler, but I assume that you know everything I'm talking about. In AC2, we had Amunet in the vault, right? Famous Egyptian assassin, where we reveal that's Aya. And in the DLC, the hidden ones, her costume is directly inspired from the vault of AC2. So you see creating references, loops like that, even with this final scene echoing the trailer of Assassin's Creed 1. And so with these little details, I think we managed to always secure, especially our fans, that this was a true Assassin's Creed game. And this was also true with the present day. So we are back with the formula with the third-person character, introducing Layla, because we think this formula has a lot to bring in terms of narrative, and it's better understood. But even with that, we can create connections. William is Desmond's father, sorry. And if you look into our computer, you have tons of references to other games and the movies. And so that's the way we refreshed and respect Assassin's Creed. In a few words, basically, I would have to say that know your brand first. If you don't want people to screw it, to dilute it, to say or do things that are not supposed to be done, know it and communicate it, right? Think about the Bibles, etc. In terms of gameplay, you need to clearly identify your strengths. What are the things, the features that make your game shine so that you can focus on it and try to disperse yourself. But at the same time, don't hesitate to grow your teams. This growth of Assassin's Creed during the last decade would not have been possible without other studios all around the world. If we were too protective, this wouldn't work. The same with external teams, comics, movies, etc. And the last lesson I would encourage you is to listen to your audience. We really try to do it. With this, initiates, global hub, etc., we went probably a bit too far. But in general, I mean, you need to listen to your audience, not only the hardcore fans. That's the advice I would say. So just to finish, it's actually quite simple. I like this slide. For me, it's creation in general, conception in general, developing games or whatever, is all about, this Tai Chi mentality. Being solid, you know what you want to do. At the same time, remaining flexible. You need to be able to adapt to opportunities or issues and remain open so that you can work with others that will bring you, solutions, ideas, etc. So it's this constant flux between, solidity, not stiffness, and flexibility. And that's it for me today. Thank you very much. So I think we have time for some questions. You can come to the mic, or after in the follow-up outlooks. Any questions? Yes?
Yeah. Hi, thank you. So history is a very big part of the franchise. So how do you decide which country or which kind of historic eras you choose to work on for each game? Thank you.
So that's a very common question in the sense that there is a lot of guessing, people trying to guess what's the next installment. It's always a discussion between the creative team, the developers, the marketing, the HQ. We need to come up with an agreement where the team feels empowered about the setting. That's something they really want to explore. At the same time, we need to secure that it had some marketing appeal. So there is no rule, I would say. It's really which time period are you interested in? Does it make sense from a business perspective? Is the audience ready for that? Yes, okay. It's as simple. There is no golden rule, for everything. That's what I try to explain here with the Tai Chi thing. It's you need to know what you want to do, but at the same time be able to adapt at every time.
Hi, John.
Hello.
So you were talking a little bit about the brand strategy and transmedia stuff, and so one of the more recent decisions that's kind of drawn a little bit of ire from the fans is taking the Juno plotline, which was started, 5+ years ago, and shifting that to the comics and then kind of abandoning it in the games. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what goes into making a decision like that, and if there are any lessons learned.
Well, it's always a matter of what's more important, and who does it affect. What are the means that need to be put in place to deliver it properly? And so it's always discussions. There is and so Juno we know is really and was really important for a part of our audience. But when you look at the overall audience, not so many people actually know about Juno. So we knew it was important and we needed a sense of closure for this story. But that was not, and that couldn't ever be the core narrative of one big game. So this is why basically we came up with this solution. But it's always a discussion. Like I try to explain also with the discussions we had for features of the game, there is nothing as, okay, here is the rule on everything that is valid for everything. So it's always bit by bit, piece by piece. I don't know how to say that in English properly. And so at least I think that now there is a sense of closure for this narrative line. We know that some people would have preferred to have that in games, but at the same time, especially with Origins also, we knew we wanted to attract and to bring newcomers to the franchise. And being set prior to SC1 was a good way to say, you know what, there is no narrative barrier. So come with us.
Hi.
Hello?
Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to collect feedback from a more general audience? Because they tend to be a little bit less vocal, so what were your strategies for getting that feedback?
Well, we always do surveys, post-launch surveys. We have teams that are specialized into that, trying to analyze the way people play our games, what they like, what they dislike about them. And so this is, I would say, mostly the way we go into details. But at the same time, our community managers are doing a fantastic job, to be really in contact with the audience in general. And so to gather feedbacks, no matter, whatever they are, so that we can try. But there's always a guess in the end, right? And so, but we also look at the competition, how the industry is evolving, and so we need to find our place into that. There's no massive worldwide, thing to say, okay, and we know exactly what you want. But we have tools like that, strategies to know better, at least.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi. You talked about growing your teams in multiple locations. Could you give us an idea of how many people you have in each of the locations, and is there a limit on how big a geographical location can be in terms of one part of your team?
There's no limits per se. It's really based on each studio management, to say we're capping for some reason. This team can't grow more than this. And then it's really on the producer side to be in constant contact with these teams. In the end, the last big games we're talking about several hundred people. Mm-hmm. I can't give you exact figures, but several hundreds. We were, I think, more than 300 in Montreal only. And so big teams in Singapore, so Sofia, plus some others in Chengdu, in Montpellier, a lot of studios. But it's really about collaborating. So we have, for example, in the lead studio, typically as a collaboration team, where we have a producer, a technical guy, design persons that are the key contact point for the other studios. And so to make sure that the communication goes well. It's hard, it's not always easy, especially for the co-development studios that are most of the time waiting for things from the lead studio. But in the end, it works well.
Does the co-development studio get creative control of the area within their mandate?
Yes, more and more. That's the idea of the co-development versus the collaboration, where the collaboration is really about, okay, you do this, that way, almost, when with the co-dev is really we're teams, And so when you think about Origins, Sofia had the responsibility to bring all the tombs, all the pyramids, for example, for the entire games, plus their region, including their narrative, etc. And Singapore did all the water tech with the feluccas, with the naval missions, with all this. And these were there. So obviously we were giving feedback. Montreal was giving feedback with them, working on that. But that's their stuff. They developed systems specifically for that because they wanted to. For me, as a creative director, I'm the responsible for the overall experience. So I won't go into the detail. I'm not the game designer above the game designer. I'm not the artistic director above the artistic director. My focus is really the global experience. So if it's in line, if the purpose is good, if it fits the global vision, then do it.
Great, thank you.
Hi, so firstly it was a great talk, so thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
You talked a lot about not being afraid to refresh the brand and consider changes. I'm wondering what the biggest change you considered was that you ultimately stepped away from.
The biggest change?
The biggest change that you considered in any aspect of each successive game that you ultimately decided was too big?
I think with Origin it was clearly the fight, because now we were touching this second-to-second experience, which is super important because you can build a big world, but if you don't like your interaction with your enemies, you're screwed basically. So this was a big one, but it was awaited. It was needed also, and the team was good. So, but there is the NPC also. The AI was big. The AI was big because it affected the production. It affected the pipeline of it. For example, in previous ACs, when you go into the streets and you see, I don't know, a blacksmith or somebody working, well, we call that a crowd station. It's like a little cinematic that is placed here, and that won't change. Mm-hmm. And so when you bumped into it, they were released in the crowd flow, and they would walk away, or not move at all for the entire day. With Origins, we came up with this agenda system where people would sleep, eat, work, and this was brand new and creating a lot of new challenges. I think there is a very nice talk tomorrow about debugging and making sure we reach quality with Nicolas Routier. I invite you tomorrow for that.
Cool, thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, I know Assassin's Creed, you released some VR experiences alongside the movies. I'm wondering if you were involved in any of those, or if you could comment on any of the VR developments around Assassin's Creed.
No, this was more actually a kind of a part of the marketing campaign of the movie. So we had nothing to do with that, sadly. I cannot give you any details about that. I wasn't involved at all.
So none of the game assets were used, or anything?
Yes, this we do a lot. We never hesitate to share our assets. I mean, they are Ubisoft properties, so if we can help. And sometimes we have very cool collaboration, not only for marketing, but for museums, for example, or documentaries that ask us for some visuals, to illustrate their things. So yeah, we quite often share assets.
Oh, wonderful. I'll speak with you about that after.
Maybe a last one?
Yeah, okay. Have you ever done the personas for your audience, and how you define your hardcore player, micro player, and the other players? And are they involved for different generation of the games?
Yes, so the surveys I was talking about earlier help us define the type of players we have. But we don't do the distinctions between hardcore players, middle, or it's more about profile and the way they experience the game. So for example, we have the completers, that really focus on doing everything, cleaning the map, whole thing, and it can take them a long time. We have more the guys that rush the story and really want to finish the narrative. You have the ones that really focus on fight, because that's what they like, big challenges, big endgame content. This is why we came up with the war elephants, or the snakes, or the Juno event, the Trials of the God thing. But so this is more the way we identify our players, and trying to come up with things for everybody.
Okay, cool. Last question. I'm a big fan of the Assassin's Creed. I come from China, and we got history, we got Assassin. Have you ever thought about, made a game on Chinese historical background about Assassin's Creed? I'm really looking forward for it. Okay.
Well, I was here to talk to you about the past of the franchise. The last decade, I know nothing about the future. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.